There is a night that the entire town of Pikeville, Kentucky still talks about. August 2001. A Thursday. Hot and breathless in the way that only Appalachian summers can be, when the air sits heavy and nothing moves and the night never quite cools down. At approximately 11:45, something appeared in the sky over the eastern ridge. Circular. Silent. Moving at a speed that none of the witnesses could agree on. Some said slow, some said it covered the horizon in under 30 seconds. What everyone agreed on was the light. A pale, even glow that did not flicker, did not pulse, and cast no shadow on the ground below. By midnight, half the town was outside. People stood in driveways and front yards and the parking lot of the Gas and Go on Main Street with their necks craned back and their phones pointed upward. It was the most anyone in Pikeville had looked at the same thing at the same time in living memory. And standing in the gravel yard of a trailer on Ridgeline Road, a 12-year-old girl named Nora watched it too. She watched it for exactly as long as it took to cross from one edge of the sky to the other. Then she went back inside, finished her homework, went to sleep. Because Nora had understood something at 12 years old, that would take most of the adults in that yard considerably longer to figure out. That what was in the sky that night was not going to change what was waiting for her in the morning. Stay until the end, because this story is not about what was in the sky over Pikeville in August of 2001. It is about the girl who was the only one who looked away first. Pikeville, Kentucky, in the late 1990s, was a town that had learned to live inside its own limits. It sits in the heart of Pike County, coal country, eastern Appalachia, a place where the mountains are beautiful and the economy had been quietly collapsing for 2 decades by the time Nora was born, in 1989. The mines had provided for 2 generations of families. By the time Nora's parents were old enough to work, there was less to provide. Nora's mother had left when Nora was 4. Not dramatically, not in the middle of a fight. She had simply gradually stopped being there. Phone calls that came less often, then visits that stopped, then a postcard from Louisville that arrived on Nora's 7th birthday with $15 inside and no return address. Nora's father worked at a furniture manufacturing plant 40 minutes away. He was not a bad man. He was an exhausted man, which, in that specific town in that specific decade, meant approximately the same thing. It was Nora's grandmother who raised her. May, 62 years old, with a bad hip and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and a voice that could carry the full length of a trailer home without being raised. May was the architecture of Nora's entire childhood. May had a saying she repeated so often that Nora could hear it in her sleep. A quiet person in a loud room always knows more than anyone else in it. It wasn't advice. It was observation. May herself was the proof. She had worked the same job for 27 years, inventory clerk at the county hospital supply warehouse, and in that time she had watched administrators come and go, budgets get cut and restored, entire departments reorganized around her. She survived every single round of changes by being indispensable and invisible in equal measure. She knew where everything was. She remembered everything she was told. She asked for nothing beyond what she earned. And she raised Nora with those same principles. Not as a philosophy, but as a survival manual for a world that did not hand anything to girls who looked like them, came from where they came from, or lived in addresses that ended in the word road instead of drive or lane. You are going to have to be twice as good, May told Nora once on a Sunday afternoon when Nora had come home upset about something a boy at school had said about where she lived. That doesn't seem fair, Nora said. May looked at her for a long moment. No, she said. Doesn't. And then she handed Nora the book she had been reading and said, Chapter 12. That was May's version of comfort. Keep going. Nora was not the kind of student that teachers remembered. This was not because she was unremarkable. It was because she was quiet in a system that rewarded volume. She sat in the 3rd row. She turned in every assignment. She scored well on tests, very well in fact, but she never raised her hand, never stayed after class to be seen, never performed the particular kind of visible enthusiasm that earns a student the label gifted and opens the doors that come with it. In 7th grade, the school had a program for high-achieving students, a Saturday enrichment course at the community college in Prestonsburg. The selection was made by teacher recommendation. Nora was not recommended. Her scores qualified her 3 times over. She was not recommended. When May found out from the mother of another student, not from any teacher, she walked into the school the following Monday with the quiet, deliberate energy of someone who has made a decision and is not interested in debating it. She sat across from Nora's homeroom teacher. She placed Nora's last 4 test scores on the desk between them. She said nothing. The teacher looked at the scores, looked at May, said something about how the program was very competitive. I can see that, May said, in a tone that made it very clear she could also see something else entirely. Nora was enrolled in the program the following week. She never forgot that her grandmother had done what she herself had not known how to do yet. She also never forgot why it had been necessary. Back to that August night in 2001. What Nora does not tell people, what she has never told anyone except one person much later, is that she knew about the light before it appeared. Not in any mysterious way. She had heard the neighbor's dog start barking at around 11. Then the radio her father left on in the kitchen suddenly lost its signal, filling the trailer with static. Then the motion light above the back door flicked on and off 3 times in succession with nothing visible in the yard. Nora had looked up from her homework, waited, and when the light appeared over the eastern ridge, she was ready for it. Not with a camera or a phone or a shout to wake her father, but with the particular attention of a child who had learned early that the world gives you signals before it gives you the thing itself, and that your job is to be paying attention when they arrive. She watched the light cross the sky. She registered what she saw. She went back inside. What she remembers most clearly is not the light itself. It is the sounds from outside. The voices of neighbors, the exclamations, the scramble for cameras, the noise of 20 people who had not spoken to each other all summer suddenly gathered in the common space between their homes, connected by the same astonishment. All of them looking up. None of them looking at each other. None of them looking at the 12-year-old girl in the yard of the trailer on the corner who had already turned and walked back inside. That moment, that specific, small, unremarkable invisibility was not new to Nora. It was Tuesday. High school in Pikeville was 4 years of maintaining a distinction most people around her did not think worth maintaining. The distinction between what was expected and what was possible. The expected path had a shape everyone recognized. Graduate. Get a job, factory, hospital, retail, the school itself if you were lucky. Get married early. Have children. Stay. It was not a bad life, that path. But it was the only path anyone pointed toward. And for Nora, the absence of alternatives felt less like protection and more like a wall. She worked her first job at 15, weekends at a diner on the highway, clearing tables and refilling coffee for truckers and travelers who passed through Pikeville without stopping long enough to see it. She saved every dollar with the precision May had taught her, and that she had improved upon. She had a notebook, spiral-bound, blue cover, where she tracked her savings on one page and a running list on the facing page. The list was titled, in her 14-year-old handwriting, What I Will Need to Leave. Not if I leave. What I will need. In Nora's high school, the college counselor visited each student once, a single appointment, 15 minutes, junior year. The counselor's name was Mr. Callahan. He was 60 years old and had been the factory foreman for a decade before the plant downsized, and he had reinvented himself as a school administrator. He was not unkind. He was operating from a map of the world that had been drawn for a specific kind of student and had not been updated. He looked at Nora's transcript. He looked at her test scores. He looked at her address. Have you thought about the community college in Prestonsburg, he said. Good programs. Affordable. Close to home. Nora looked at him for a moment. I'm applying to the University of Kentucky, she said. Mr. Callahan paused. That's a significant financial commitment, he said. Have you looked into what that actually costs for a student in your situation? Nora reached into her bag. She placed a printed page on the desk between them. It was a list of every scholarship, grant and financial aid program she had found that she qualified for, compiled over 6 months, cross-referenced with her grade point average and test scores, annotated in her own handwriting. There were 9 items on the list. Mr. Callahan looked at the page for a long moment. Then he looked at Nora. She waited. "I'll write you the recommendation," he said. To understand Nora, you need to understand May the way Nora understood her. Not as a grandmother, but as a teacher who never used that word. May had grown up in a coal town 30 miles east of Pikeville. She had married at 19, buried her husband at 44, raised 3 children largely alone, and built a life out of the kind of compound interest that has nothing to do with money, the accumulation of small, consistent, unwitnessed acts of discipline. She ironed her work clothes the night before. She kept a running grocery list taped to the cabinet. She read every single document she signed. She never borrowed what she could save for. These were not dramatic gestures. They were the daily architecture of a life that refused to be at the mercy of circumstances it could not control. What May gave Nora was not encouragement. Encouragement is for people who need to be convinced. May never tried to convince Nora of anything. She simply modeled with every action, every Sunday, every year what it looked like to refuse to be defined by what the world assumed you were. The night before Nora left for Lexington, May made supper. Soup beans, cornbread, a mason jar of sweet tea. They ate without talking much. The television was off, which was unusual. Outside, the last of the summer light was fading over the ridge. After supper, May washed the dishes and Nora dried them, the way they always had. When they were done, May folded the dish towel over the oven handle precisely, the way she always did, and said, without looking up, "You're going to feel like you don't belong there." Nora was quiet. "You're going to be right," May continued. "And it won't matter. Because belonging somewhere and building something, there are 2 different things. Don't confuse them." She turned off the kitchen light. "Get some sleep." The morning Nora left Pikeville, May drove her to the bus station in the old Buick that technically wasn't supposed to leave the county anymore because of a transmission problem neither of them ever officially acknowledged. They loaded the 2 bags into the trunk. May handed her an envelope. Inside was $240, money May had been setting aside, Nora would later calculate, for at least 2 years. Nora tried to say something. May held up one hand. "It's not a gift," she said. "It's an investment. Don't make me regret it." She said it in the exact tone that meant the opposite, that meant, "I am more certain of you than I have ever been of anything," and Nora knew that, and May knew that Nora knew it. They did not hug for long. May was not a long hug person. She was a get-on-the-bus person. Nora got on the bus. She watched Pikeville recede through the window, the ridges, the water tower, the gas and go where people had gathered 10 years ago to look at a light in the sky, and she felt the specific weight of a beginning that has cost you something real to reach. She turned forward. Lexington was 2 hours away. She opened May's envelope on the bus and found, behind the money, a folded slip of paper. 4 sentences in May's careful handwriting. "You've been the quietest person in every loud room since you were 3 years old. I used to worry about that. I don't anymore. Quiet is how you saved everything up for this." Nora read it twice. She folded it back exactly as it had been. Kept it in the front pocket of her bag for the next 4 years. She still has it. University was a different country. Nora had prepared for the academic difficulty. She had not prepared for the social geography, the invisible maps that told you which table was which people came from where, which accent placed you where in the unspoken hierarchy of a place that liked to believe it had no hierarchy. She was from Eastern Kentucky. She said holler instead of valley. She had never been on an airplane. She owned 3 pairs of shoes. These things on their own were nothing. But together, in a context where everyone seemed to have grown up already knowing the language of a certain kind of ambition, they formed a particular kind of loneliness. Not isolation. She made friends, 1 then 2 then slowly more. But there was a loneliness underneath that she didn't have a name for until years later. The loneliness of being in a place where the version of you that people saw did not include where you had actually come from, where your origin was something to minimize, translate, or explain. She worked 25 hours a week at the university library. She discovered in that job that she was extremely good at finding things. Not just books, patterns, connections. The way information organized itself if you looked at enough of it from the right angle. Her major was communications. Her actual education was happening in the stacks at 2 in the morning, reading things no class had assigned. In the second semester of her sophomore year, Nora took an elective Media and Social Systems, taught by a professor named Dr. Susan Voss. Dr. Voss was 48 years old, had written 3 books, and had a teaching style that other students found intimidating, and Nora found, for the first time in her academic life, genuinely challenging in the direction she wanted to be challenged. Dr. Voss did not lecture. She questioned. She pushed. She had a particular skill for identifying the exact place where a student's thinking stopped being lazy and started being real. 8 weeks into the semester, after a class where Nora had finally pushed back on something Dr. Voss said rather than simply absorbing it, the professor stopped her at the door. "Where are you from?" she asked. "Pike County," Nora said. "Eastern Kentucky." Dr. Voss was quiet for a moment. "My mother was from Harlan County," she said. "Miner's daughter." That was all. But it was enough. 2 people, in a doorway, recognizing the same thing in each other, the specific quality of a person who built their entire way of thinking from materials the world gave them reluctantly. Dr. Voss became the first person in Nora's academic life who asked to hear what she thought, not just what she knew. In her junior year, Dr. Voss called Nora in for a conversation outside of class. There was a communications firm in Nashville, small, independent, serious, that took 1 university intern per year. The internship paid. It was competitive. It was the kind of opportunity that, in Nora's world, came once and did not come back. "You should apply," Dr. Voss said. "I need my library hours," Nora said. "I can't lose the income." "I know," Dr. Voss said. "The internship pays more than the library." Nora was quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Dr. Voss looked at her directly. "Because nobody told me when I was 21. And I spent 3 years after graduation figuring out on my own what someone could have told me in 5 minutes." Nora applied. She rewrote her cover letter 9 times. She was accepted. And the summer between her junior and senior year changed everything. The firm was called Meridian Communications. 7 employees. A downtown Nashville office in an old converted building with exposed brick, and too many plants, and a founder named Diane, who had built the company from a freelance operation in her apartment over 11 years. Nora arrived expecting to observe. She was given actual work on the first day. Actual problems. Actual clients. Actual consequences if she got it wrong.